What's going on, guys? It's Robert Hall, and today I'm starting a new series. This is the first time that I'm really trying something like this, and I've mentioned before that I want to bring other photographers on and talk about what they're doing because I'm very set in my ways and how I approach things, but I really like taking a look at the reasoning behind other people doing things differently than I do. And one of the first people that popped in my mind was Justin Haugen. Justin, why I like following him is because he is so committed to making Magmod products work for him. And you guys know I'm a big proponent of soft light because of the beauty results that you can get from it. But Justin has this, he decided a few years back that he was going to commit to using them for the benefits that we'll discuss in the future. But he's committed to those, and the work that he's made by using those, maximizing their ability, is just outstanding. And there's a few photographers out there that are at the caliber that he is making this kind of imagery with Magmod products. So definitely want to highlight why he makes those decisions and just go over some lighting tips in general. So Justin's actually in town. He did a workshop yesterday for the DPPA centered around lighting tips and stuff. So I thought this was all nice, fresh in his head, and that's why he's here today. I stayed for his presentation yesterday, and I picked up some notable tips that I wanted to discuss with you guys and just let him come on and elaborate on them, discuss them more, and tell you guys why it's important to him. The first thing that was consistent through all of Justin's workshop was that he has to have flash be very fast and accessible to him. Not only the products that he's using, but the adjustments that he's making, how he makes those adjustments, just everything in his using flash philosophy is quick. And talk more about that.
So I think often we get wrapped up in how we set up this equipment and what we're doing with it, where we're placing it. And the objective for me is to cut through all of that and really get to a place where we're setting the equipment up quickly, we're going through the settings fast, and then we're eliminating the time that we're spending away from our clients, because we really want to be giving the clients the most face time and giving them that human experience of photography. The last thing people want to see is my back turned to them, telling them, hold on a second, I'm going to move this flash around, or let me get my settings right. The less time we spend doing that, the more time we spend interfacing with our clients, giving them the customer service experience and telling their story, whether it's a wedding or a portrait experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge thing. And even if it's not about flash, one thing you should really never do is express to your clients that you're figuring it out. Mm-hmm. You know, you should, one sec, I got a test, oh, that didn't work. Language such as that, you should really try to omit from the experience, because it just kind of makes it look like you don't know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So this is why, even if you're struggling to get the result that you want, it should always be, oh yeah, that's great, that's awesome, you know, let's keep doing that, or let's change this, that worked great, but let's change this. Just removing that kind of figuring out language from your vocabulary while you're shooting will just make you look more proficient at what you're doing.
Keep a good rapport going, keep talking, ask some questions about their family, what it is they do. Work on those types of conversation topics to pull the people out of the experience of the photography and into the experience of your service.
So the next thing that I've talked about this before on my channel, and you mentioned it, so this was a perfect point for me because people don't think about it, and that is that light is just as much about where you don't put it as where you do put it.
In using off-camera flash and working with Magmod, I've learned that it's not where I place the light that matters most, it's where I'm not placing the light. Things like distracting objects in the foreground and background, the floor. I'm not trying to light the floor up. I'm not trying to light up that Starbucks cup sitting on the coffee table in the middle of bridal prep. I'm not trying to light up clutter on the back table while the makeup artist is doing her hair and makeup on the bride. Those aren't part of the wedding story. What's most important to me is that I'm getting the light directly on my subject. I'm not unintentionally lighting things with unintentional spill, and I'm using the Magmod system to shape my light and really tell the wedding story and focus our viewer's eye to exactly what is the most important part of the image.
So what's like the most essential tool in your kit for keeping light focused on your subject?
Oddly enough, when I first got into the Magmod system, this product was what I said was what I needed the least in my photography, and now it's become the thing I needed the most, and that's the grid. The grid helps me control the spill, it keeps a tighter pattern of light, and it really helps me focus the light exactly where I intend to hit it.
So you mentioned that you're really focused on eliminating spill, but you would also said that probably the most important aspect of your lighting is the direction that your light is coming from. Why is direction so important in the images that you want to create?
So often I think for photographers, when we first start working with off-camera flash, the biggest win for us is that we got the light set up, and usually it's a few feet to the left or right of us, and we got it up like 7, 8, 9 feet. Whoever told us that, yeah, put the flash up like 10 feet, pointed at a 45-degree angle at your subject. Whatever we started doing with flash initially, that was like our win. Like, we got the light directed at the subject, we turned it on, and I somehow managed to see the flash effectively work given my lighting circumstances. And that's not really imaginative lighting to me. Like, I'm not very keen on axis light. I don't like front fill as my main light source unless I'm using like a big softbox. I think, especially when you're working with speed lights and you're working with smaller modifiers like these grids and the sphere and the Magmod system, we really want to move the light off axis, because that's where you start to shape and see shadow and that shadow transition where the shadow falls off on the cheek. And it's how we sculpt and shape these bodies and faces. And especially when we're working with people of all different kinds of body type, great off-axis directional lighting is where we can actually lose pounds in the camera and hide unsightly body parts that people are most self-conscious about, and flatter them and make them feel really good on their wedding days. So I can shave 40 pounds in camera just with great light placement and great posing. So directional light is very important to me because it is the tip off for everything else I'm going to do with the subject and how I pose them and where I'm going to position my camera.
Now, just so people know, you use the Magmod modifiers, and you just mentioned speed lights. What lighting are you using in general, just so everybody knows?
On wedding day, pretty much all my sessions I'm shooting with the Godox system. I'm using the V860 Mark II version 2 speed lights, and my number one go-to light is the AD200. I've got a couple of those, wishing I had 3 or 4 of them. I really enjoy using the Magmod system with them, and because of the power output, they're a much more efficient light source than my speed lights. Yeah. I can use them at higher powers, at faster recycle, and they really help me overcome some of the light efficiency lost when using modifiers that end up eating light efficiency, like the grid and the sphere. You're going to lose a stop of light using those modifiers, especially when you start stacking them.
Yeah, so when you lose a stop of light on, say, an AD200, you're still working a little bit hotter than you would with a V860 version 2 or any other speed light. And there's no size compromise either, which is really good.
Not at all. It
still kind of fits your fast rule, right? Of being able to keep everything quick and light.
I need it all to fit inside a Pelican 1510 case, which is what I normally drag to all my shoots.
Yeah, and because you not only work in your local area of Tucson, you are also sometimes working all over the place, right? Yeah, talk a little bit about the destinations and what adjustments you make to your kit.
I used to bring a lot of gear with me on wedding day. I was bringing big Einstein monolights and the Vagabond Extreme lithium battery packs. And it's a mess. It's a lot of stuff to bring on a wedding day. I was bringing it all in a huge Pelican case. I was bringing light stands to accommodate them, a 28-inch beauty dish. It's a lot of gear to bring on wedding day. And I feel like it was slowing me down, and it was really pulling me out of my wedding experience and how I was working with my clients. And so I committed to a smaller footprint. I started working with the Magmod gear. I made a compromise about the quality of light that I was working with, and that when I was going to shoot beauty light with brides especially, I was going to find natural soft diffuse light in my environment, and that when I worked with flashes, it would be more to showcase my subjects, work with more dynamic lighting scenarios, and shoot in a more environmental way. I wanted to make sure that when I was traveling, I wasn't making a compromise of equipment that I could bring with me on location in my hometown versus when I was going on location to other cities for wedding work. So obviously I can't be traveling around with a huge Pelican full of Einsteins and battery packs. So now that I could fit everything into one Pelican case with 2 Manfrotto nano stands, I could literally travel anywhere and not have any compromise in the quality of work that I offered in my own backyard versus when I traveled to somewhere else.
I've always wondered that because I see photographers talking about the kit that they're bringing to this destination wedding, and it's completely different from what they're using on a wedding at their home. And I'm like, what compromises are you making to the images that you're going to create? Are you going to be able to deliver those results? So it's actually nice that you have that same system at home and going away. The only thing you're changing is stands, which will not affect any type of image.
Absolutely.
Okay, one thing that was really consistent in your presentation yesterday is something I guess I've probably mentally done for a really long time, but I never thought of it in this fashion, and that was you were always referring to like lighting patterns in a clock fashion, and it especially became important when you started discussing using multiple lights. So talk about how you're regularly thinking about lighting in that fashion.
So I'm really trying to drill home this idea of being able to understand what is happening with your light in relation to your subject and where you position with the camera. So if you're looking at the diagram, and I can share that with you too to share with your viewers, if you are the camera positioned at 6 o'clock on a clock and your subject is at the center of where the hands of the clock are at, wherever you position your flash relative to you around that clock, you should be able to pre-visualize where that light is going to hit the subject in the face, pointed at their face, and how it's that pattern of light is going to look as it falls off along their body, what the spill will look like as it reaches nearby surfaces. And as you practice and position that light all the way around your subject in a 360 pattern, you'll start to get past that 9 o'clock phase where it becomes side light, starts to become rim light, accent light, hair light, and then as it works its way back around towards the camera and on axis, you get that front fill. So with practice and time and repetition, you'll start to pre-visualize the position of the light relative to your subject and your camera position, and you'll know before you even take the shot generally what the pattern of light is going to look like on their face, and it's a tip-off point of how you're going to pose your model and achieve some of those classic lighting styles like short light, Rembrandt light, or broad light.
What time is Rembrandt light?
Rembrandt light would be right around, 8 o'clock, 8:30, and on the other side of the clock it'd be right around 3:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30 I think, 4 o'clock.
There you go. Now you guys know what time it is. So you're regularly using multiple lights, and you're able to do so because you're so familiar with how a single light interacts, on the clock and thinking that way, and you're also able to bring in multiple. But you also said you wanted to be more imaginative with your lighting, so what is the thought process behind bringing in a second, third, however many lights?
So I think a lot of people, when they're shooting with one light and they're happy with the results they're getting, but I think oftentimes people are buying 2, 3, 4 lights. I don't know how many times I've helped out friends who are buying gear, and I want to just tell them buy 1 light, maybe buy 2, and they come back like, I bought 3 speed lights, I bought 4 strobes. And they haven't quite nailed down 1 light yet, and they definitely don't know what to do with the second, third, or fourth light. And so I want people to think about the reasons for additional lights. And so when you're introducing a second light, there's 3 reasons that you would introduce a second light. One is to rim or accent light the subject. Usually we call that a hair light. And when we're doing that, we're giving edge definition to someone's head or body. Typically that comes into play when somebody's got dark hair and they are the background behind them is a dark background. We get that dark form of hair blending in with that background behind them. So when you introduce a kicker or a rim light to hair light them and get that edge light, it helps give them some background separation. Another reason we use a second light is to give some on-axis fill, or you can do off-axis fill, but I prefer on-axis fill because it makes for no conflicting shadows or cross shadows. And so,
real quick, an on-axis fill is a fill at 6 p.m. directly over your camera, whereas an off-axis would be opposing the side of your key light, which can create some strange shadow patterns, multi-shadows, they kind of clash with your key light.
And so a little bit of on-axis fill is how I like to lift the darkest shadows in the scene. And another reason we use a second light is we can light the background. Those are 3 reasons that I use a second light. And if we think about more complex multi-light setups, we can introduce a third or a fourth light to do those other tasks that I just mentioned. So we could have the first light as a key light, a second light as a hair light, a third light as a background light, and a fourth light as a on-axis fill to lift the shadows. And that's one way that you could go about using multiple lights to light a subject in a portrait.
And that ties right back with the first point that you made regarding your initial approaches to eliminate distractions, and that actually creates the opportunity for you to make those decisions with the second, third, and fourth light.
And that's why it's so important for me about light not hitting unintentionally where I don't want it to. I'm keeping the spill control very tight to my subject so that main key light isn't spilling light onto my background, because that's when I can come in and introduce a background light. If my main light is spilling onto the backdrop, I'll wash out that background light, especially if I'm using any kind of colored gels and doing something interesting with the background in that way.
So the final thing I want to touch on is you were demonstrating a certain lighting concept, and it initially like wasn't going as planned, and you kind of refined it until you got the result that you were looking for.
But you know what? This is my process. I trial and error. I didn't get it the first try. I'm not embarrassed by it. I'm a little embarrassed by it, but we're gonna work it. All right.
Appreciate honesty.
It lends to the fact that you're utilizing trial and error, and you're talking about when it's okay to kind of mess up with Flash and when you should do that. So just lend us your thoughts on that.
While we don't want to tip our hand to our clients or our subjects, letting them know that we've made a mistake, but oftentimes we're practicing, we're working with models, we're trying out new concepts, and it's okay to make a mistake and own up to it. Or maybe you don't have to mention it at all. In this particular setting where I was in a room full of people watching me work, but I wasn't afraid to let them know, like, hey, I'm not getting the result that I thought I was going to get. It's going to take a little bit of tinkering and moving around, and that we're going to get there, but hang in there with me, because I want to humanize the experience of photography as a process, and that we are going to make mistakes, and that all of our learning comes through mistakes. I've never learned anything because I knew how to do it right off the bat. I've only learned because I've made mistakes, I've made adjustments, and I've corrected them, and I've gotten the results that I intended to, but only after that process.
And that just goes to show how important practice is. You know, I think a lot of people find it acceptable to practice on the job. I'll get better at lighting as I work these sessions. I do more sessions. It's like, well, if people are paying you, that's probably not the best time to practice, right?
Not at all. And I plan practice sessions. I book time with models. I have them come to my studio. We work on location. I try out new concepts. I try out things that I've been thinking about, things that I've seen other photographers do. But if you're really tight for time and you're working on a wedding, for example, and you want to practice, there's ways to get some practice time out of that day, because a wedding day is a long day. So you might be scheduled for 1 o'clock to show up for bridal prep. Show up at 12 o'clock and let the bride know, hey, I'm here a little early, I'm doing some setup, nothing here is mission essential, I just want to do some stuff and play around with the camera before we get into the photography that we had planned for. And that's a great way to get some extra minutes out of your day, and a low pressure, easy way to practice your setups, set your lights up, and see what the light is doing, and not have to feel pressured to deliver stuff that you had promised during the set time that you booked with your client.
Yeah, that's really smart, and I feel like I'm going to be going to my next bridal prep early. Just because, it's been a while since I've really played, and you feel like you don't have that freedom after you do it for a while. But if you're early, then why not, right? Going back to practice sessions, you should be seeking out some form of practice, whether it's attending a workshop, setting up trade for sessions. You know, everybody wants to be against trade for sessions, but they're really beneficial to the photographer for you to try out new things, and you should be incorporating that anytime you're bringing out new equipment. You know, you said some people are just overwhelmed when they get Magmod gear, right? You know, they get the gear and they don't get the results like you get, or like some of these other awesome photographers get, and they kind of give up on it. And really, it's just the fact that they haven't practiced enough.
And I like to tell this to people, and I see that common experience a lot, where people buy the gear and they try it out, and then after some failures with it, it ends up getting not used or ends up getting sold off. And I really hate to see people do that with gear that I know is giving me great results. But it took me time, practice, and repetition. It took me a lot of failures with it. It took me a lot of observation of what the light was doing and understanding of what was going on, and practice and seeing where the position of the light mattered and what was happening to the light patterns relative to my subject. I had to observe all that through failure, and I think everyone should take the time to invest in it before they discard a tool that isn't necessarily working for them right off the bat.
I hope you like this new series. I hope you like getting a different perspective in using lighting gear and lighting products. Again, Justin is using Magmod Products. You primarily use, I believe you mentioned the MagSphere, Mag Grid is your most essential, and the gels, but you utilize every tool for different purposes. So he's using that along with Godox lighting. So just wanted to share that information and his thought process with you guys. If you want to see more of these, there's lots of great photographers that I think I could talk to and get their insight on. So if you liked it, let me know in the comments below, or hit like on the video so that I know to make more of these. Till next time, keep on shooting, YouTube. What time is Rembrandt light?
Goes over Chalmers to get it stolen by James. Here comes James, lobs.
Rembrandt light it'd be right around 8 o'clock, 8:30, and on the other side of the clock it'd be right around 3:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30, I think, 4 o'clock.
James lobs to Wade.
There you go. Now you guys know what time it is.
Wade back to James.
Yes!
Fucking alley-oop and then a
Yes! That was great!